after lunch when people are still digesting their food, right? If you're fasting, it's not the best thing. I personally am not fasting for medical reasons, so that gives me a little bit more strength here. Not that we're taking an inventory about who's fasting, and I will not be asking you also. I find out, I realize that I do have trigger words, and one of my trigger phrases is have a meaningful fast. That triggers me. I don't know why, but it just, I'm always suspicious of people who want me to do meaningful things. Albeit just for people who don't know me, I'm usually much nicer. So let's share a screen. And I thought the title, and we'll come back to the title, about Rabbi Akiva laughing at Auschwitz. And I want to get into that a little bit, but first I want to start with Rembrandt. So this is Rembrandt's prophet Jeremiah. How do we start? Can you see it? Try to make it bigger here. That's an incredible thing, huh? Yeah, anybody want to talk about this a little bit? What do you see? I mean, I do think it's helpful to think of, well, I mean, this is Rembrandt's Midrash on Jeremiah. I think it's a very Jewish one, but anyway, anything that you would point out about this image?
Relating to the previous Rembrandts, just to say that the source of the light is interesting, and also the vessel being foregrounded and centered and coming towards us.
What do you make of that?
Is notable.
No, the vessel is, I mean, the first thing I did when a friend of mine sent this to me, and the first thing I did was I Googled the painting and I wanted to find out what this thing is. And it's not like the first thing that art historians think of putting there. They don't ask them. I mean, they ask those questions, I assume, but that's not what's foregrounded for them. So it is strange. First of all, you're right. It's right in the middle of the picture. It is. So we assume it's the temple vessels. Is that the assumption? And the cups, I don't know, these tassels seem to be attached to something inside. The Google stuff is really amazing, right? Like what is
the silver
this?
one? The silver one on the left looks like a helmet.
It does.
I think it's interesting that Jeremiah has a Bible.
Right, so that is kind of interesting. Well, Bibles show up in strange places in Rembrandt's painting. There's a picture, the painting that he made of Hannah teaching Samuel, teaching Shmuel in the temple, and she's holding this like radioactive book, and it's clear that this book is telling much more even than she knows. It's a Christian painting, but here, Tikva, yeah, you point out the Bible here. What do you make of that? What is the relationship between the Bible as it's represented here and what this painting is representing?
It's an armrest. It's like it's too late. We can't use
closed chapter. Yeah.
Right. Those of us who have together been looking at Rembrandt's pictures of people reading, right? This is extraordinary in that sense that here we've seen different kinds of books, like the radioactive book that I spoke about. What are some of other great Rembrandt books? Should we Google and find one? Let's see, Rembrandt. Oh yeah, in the study maybe? Or no, it's Jerome in the study. It's a very hard painting to see. Of St. Jerome in a chamber. Look at this, right? Think about the way that Rembrandt is using light here. And Ed, you pointed out before that there's this source of this enlightenment, the light that's coming from the outside. His eyes are closed. The book is open. There are all these other, I mean, we're not reading this painting now, but you see the book figures centrally here. as some means, some way of getting some form of revelation. He's in a dark place. Anyway, but we're focusing on this painting. And so a little bit more of the significance of the book being closed. Yeah, go ahead, Ed.
I find it almost contradictory because the light is settling on the sort of instruments of liturgy, and the book is shrouded in darkness, and yet the book is where he's resting his elbow, and it seems that it's almost unbeknownst to Jerome at this point that the future will lie within the text rather than within.
That's a very rabbinic reading, I think, Ed, right? Which is a compliment, and I'm sure that's right in a way. I think there are other things we have to look at here. I mean, what is this over here? I mean, Ed is saying basically the rabbinic argument is, the temple is being destroyed. Here are the vessels. The future of Judaism is in the book. So why is he resting his arm on that? So that's definitely a way of an interesting way of approaching it. What is this over here?
Jerusalem burning.
Right. So I didn't really notice this until about the 20th time I looked at it. And if you look closer, it seems that these people are either taking bodies out or descending. We've seen places before in Rembrandt where it's not clear whether people are going up or going down, pulling or pushing. Rembrandt gives us both things here. And what about over here? What is this?
Can I go back to the Jerusalem burning thing for a second?
Yeah, sure.
Could it be flip? I've forgotten the name of the king. But could it be there's the king went to a secret tunnel to escape the palace? Could it be that?
You're thinking of Rabbi Yochanan. I don't know.
No, not Rabbi.
You're not thinking of Rabbi Yochanan.
I'm thinking.
I don't know. I don't know. So you say, I don't know it, and I don't know what Rembrandt knew. So I don't know about that. But it is clearly just this place where this catastrophe is happening. And Ed points out that the light, here's another source of light here. What about the pillar? Why is there this giant Roman pillar there? It doesn't, I think it actually mentions a dome at the end of Jeremiah. I mean, this is the presence of Rome, or whatever. This is the presence of whatever Israel is losing out as. This is what's causing that to happen. Now, the reason, and so that the sense of Roman power and the despair here. I mean, Ed, you look at that as an irony, but I think that there is this despair that's reflected in his powerlessness. It's interesting when you look at Rembrandt's paintings, prophets almost always have their shoes off, they're barefoot. And of course, here you can't see his arm or his leg. And I think Rembrandt is conveying there, this is part of the despair that Jeremiah can't do anything. He is completely helpless. He cannot do anything. This is pure despair. And at this moment, and this is why I think it's a good rabbinic midrash, is if it's a Tisha B'Av midrash, then Ed, we push your reading aside because it's not relevant. On Tisha B'Av, the book is closed. That is the experience of Tisha B'Av. The book is closed. There is nothing after it. If you look at the end of Lamentations, my translation was different. Let me just read the last few lines. Our heart is faint for these things. Our eyes are dim. The Mount of Zion, which is desolate. The foxes walk upon it. Thou, our Lord, art enthroned forever. Thy throne is from generation to generation. It's an interesting, you see the juxtaposition between the spatial context, the place. The place is desolate. God, however, still lives on some level. L'dor, from generation to generation. Wherefore dost thou forget us forever and forsake us so long time? L'orech yamim. Why is it taking so long? You see the distinction here between the eternal, enthroned forever, and the human, temporal, right? L'orech yamim, in a basic experiential human way. Then hashivenu Hashem elecha v'nashuva, chadesh yemenu k'kedem. It's a perplexing line. Turn thou unto thee, O Lord, and we shall be turned. Turn thou us, make yourself present to us, and we will make ourselves present to you. And this is the last line. Thou canst not have utterly rejected us and be exceeding wroth against us. That's turned into like a bitmiyah. That's one of the perushim in the one by Rabbi Soloveitchik that they publish in his name, whatever, Koren. It says, you cannot have utterly rejected us unless, of course, you're still really, really angry at us. Did I make clear the distinction between those two translations, between this one and the one I read? You hear? Like, one is, this can't be, right? It's more hopeful. The other is, it may be the case that you're so angry you'll never turn to us, right? And I think that translation accommodates more the experience of the day. The experience of the day in Jeremiah, and Rembrandt gets it right. The experience of the day is the book is closed. When my title, Rabbi Akiva at Auschwitz, it's overdone. And when I was at Yad Vashem this morning, I kind of regretted it. But on the other hand, I think I'm not sure. I started to understand much better what is the tragedy of Tisha B'Av. Why is it so? What is so unbearable about it? So I saw a related question. Rabbi Soloveitchik in this Moxer, where they collect what he said. Apparently, when the second temple was being rebuilt, people wanted to know, where Rabbi Soloveitchik asks, did they keep the day of Tisha B'Av or not? The temple's rebuilt. Why should there be any mourning? And he says, in fact, that even though the temple is built, that there is mourning because 600 years ago, the temple was destroyed and they lived in terror that it would be destroyed again, right? They already had that consciousness of the existential fragility of Jewish life. And they thought it happened once, it can happen again. And then to get to Rabbi Akiva, in his generation, one second, Tivka, in his generation, the temple is destroyed again. And the corollary is just thinking in one's own life, chaz v'shalom, there's no purpose in my life. There's no story that I can live. There's nothing remaining to be told. It's over. The book is closed. Yeah, Tikva.
Sorry, quick pedantic note.
I've come to miss your pedantic notes, Tikva. Go ahead, yeah.
I'm flattered. The bit of where the Israelites are asking whether or not they should fast, even though they have the second temple, is in Treyasar. I believe it's in Zechariah.
It is in Zechariah,
so
right?
That's pshat.
Right. No, but they're in Babylon, and they want to know. They're more optimistic. They're thinking the temple's in the process of being rebuilt, and it's a real commentary on the people in Babylon, right? They're faxing their rabbis in Jerusalem and saying the temple is rebuilt. Can we make a big brunch on Tisha B'Av in Babylon, right? We don't want to know about coming and rebuilding the temple. We want to know if we can stop this nasty fast, this difficult fast, right? So here there is this sense, and I think Rembrandt captures it, of a world without a future. And that is the despair without a book, the world without a future. And, the Midrash says that it likens the Chorban to people feeling personal tragedy, a loss of a spouse, whatever, death. And it doesn't say, that's the vehicle, meaning the thing we relate to is what we experience, or we can experience. That sense of hopelessness, that sense of not having a future. Now, Ed points out, really, and this is what happens in Yavna, is Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai creates a future for Judaism, and the future for Judaism is away from the temple rituals, and it is in the book, right? So let's look at let's look at, some of us have looked at this before, but I looked at it again and I was perplexed by it, and I've been spending a lot of time looking at it. So I think it's good to go over. So these stories are well known, right? This is the story about Rabbi Akiva and his three companions. And there are two stories that are connected one to the other. So what we'll do is we'll read them in English, and when I want to focus in on something, we'll go to the Hebrew. Apropos, these translations, they just get them from anywhere they can. They're not necessarily reliable. Apropos tribulations of exile and hope for redemption, the Gemara relates. And once it was that Rabbi Gamliel, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Rabbi Yeshua, and Rabbi Akiva were walking along the road in the Roman Empire, and they heard the sound of the multitudes of Rome from Puteoli. There's a question in the Meforshim what that actually is, where it was, at a distance of 120 mil. The city was so large that they were able to hear its tumult from a great distance. That's how if you look at the Hebrew, that's not clear in the Meforshim. That's how they learn this, that these four rabbis are very far from Rome, and yet they hear the presence of Rome. The commerce of Rome is present everywhere, even where they are. And the other sages began weeping, and Rabbi Akiva was laughing. Right? They said to him, "For what reason are you laughing?" Rabbi Akiva said to them, "And you, for what reason are you weeping?" They said to him, "The Gentiles who bow to false gods and burn incense to idols dwell securely and tranquilly in this colossal city. And for us, the house of the footstool of our God, the temple is burnt. Why shall we not weep?" Yeah, so we'll see, Rabbi, what does he say? So Rabbi Akiva said to them, "That's why I'm laughing. That's why I'm laughing. If those who violate his will, those who violate his will, the wicked are awarded so, how much more so for those who do perform his will?" What is Rabbi Akiva's argument to them here? This is the less well-known of the story, but it's in a tandem. It's a pair of these. And this first one, after Rabbi Akiva defends his point of view, the rabbis don't say anything. They're not moved by what he says, apparently. Then the Medrash tells another story. But what is the argument here? I'm just very bad at the logical parts of Midrashim. I'm a literary critic. Go ahead, Tikva.
Sorry, I'm too stuck on the phrase "footstool of God" to think about anything else.
Right. So what is it? So is it Kisei HaKavod? Is that what is it in Hebrew?
Hadom.
Hadom raglei Eloheinu.
Okay. Yeah. So what does that bother you?
It's just I've never thought about that metaphor before, and the idea of like what does it mean for the Mikdash to be God's footstool?
You're a student of Renaissance literature, Tikva? Did you study that with me or no? We never did that together.
Yes, I did.
We did, right. So do you remember the great chain of being? The way in which certain kinds of hierarchical structures, for the Renaissance sensibility, they make a connection somehow between the most spiritual and the most physical. And what happens in the Renaissance is most of it, like for the rabbis, happens by means of language, that there's a metaphor that somehow will connect you to something higher. And I think that's what the footstool is. It's what we have in this world that represents the divine. And even that is burnt. Even that's gone. Right? We don't. Jews are not big into immanence and embodiment, right? So the temple is the one space in which it happens, and that's not there anymore, right? I think the argument he makes back to them is it's a kol v'chomer, right? It's an a priori argument or something like that. Those who don't fulfill his will, well, they get rewarded, and we who fulfill his will, well, we'll get all the more so rewarded. I guess the assumption there is we'll get all the more so more rewarded. How? With what? with bigger place, with bigger empire? It's really not clear there. We'll be rewarded in the way we want to be rewarded. I mean, it's kind of left open.
It's also
yeah.
It's kind of contradicted by by what we, the readers, know about Rabbi Akiva and how he died.
What do we know about Rabbi Akiva? That he's happy-go-lucky?
Was one of the Rabbi Akiva was one of the Asra Hurgei Malchut. He was tortured to death. So what? So that bit of him saying like "Lo seiret sono al achat kama v'kama" is a very
nice.
Feels very ironic.
Nice. I would put it a little bit differently. I mean, what Rabbi Akiva actually did or lived is not really, forgive me, that significant for us. But the Medrash does choose to represent Rabbi Akiva in different ways, and it's interesting to see the composite of that personality of who he is. I mean, very often the Rabbi Akiva stories, in my experience, when I went to synagogue and heard people explain them, I always found them very unsatisfying. They were like very bad theodicies, right? Oh, look, everything works out in the end, right? And this story is, on the one hand, it can be learned that way. It can be learned as a fairy tale with a happy ending. But as we'll see the next episode. So I'm just putting this out here. The first thing is related to place and hearing, and this will be related to sight, also place, but sight. There's hearing in this one, there's sight in this one. So here's another incident. On another occasion, Olin Yerushalayim, and Kevan she'agiu lahar tzofim, karu bigdeihem. So they arrive on Mount Scopus. They see the site of the temple. I can see Mount Scopus from my window. Freaky, right? I mean, they rent their garments in mourning, all of them, in keeping with halachic practice. You see, that's because after, if you haven't seen the temple for 30 days, and you show your mourning, or you see it. No, you see it in ruins, and you show your mourning. When they arrived at the Temple Mount, they saw a fox that emerged from the side of the Holy of Holies, Kadosh Kadoshim. Remember the fox from the end of Eicha, right? They began weeping, and he, Rabbi Akiva, was laughing. Midmimatem bochim, amr makom shekatuv bo, v'hazar hakarav yomot, v'akshav shoalim halchu bo, v'lo nivche. And we're not going to cry. Let's just read it in English. They said to him, "For what reason you're laughing?" Rabbi Akiva said to them, "For what reason are you weeping?" Here it's different, though. It's structured differently. They said to him, "This is the place concerning which it is written, and the non-priest who approaches shall die. And now foxes walk in it, and shall we not weep?" So how is their approach different here? I mean, the first thing, they have an approach, and the first thing there's just a back and forth. What is their rejoinder to Rabbi Akiva?
I think they're implying here that the presence of God is gone.
Right, the presence of God is gone. I mean, why do they cite a proof text?
That's exactly the place where any non-priest would have gone in, or priest, whatever. However you want to read the text, if everybody who went in perished, and even now foxes can walk in and nothing happens, and are coming out alive. Maybe that's the implication.
So, I mean, so that the text is brought. So, I mean, they're saying basically the prophecy has been fulfilled, or not the prophecy has been fulfilled. No. This book is no longer relevant.
Exactly.
Right? It's again Rembrandt. This book, we don't need it anymore. The despair, not that we don't need it, we are outside of it. That's the terror. We are outside of sacred history. And for them to think that is not such a wild assumption on their part. The temple had been destroyed the second time, right? Yeah.
I think that another reading could be that God is still there, and God is allowing these foxes to walk on the Temple Mount, and that God has removed the sanctity from this place.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's another midrash that says halavai, that they didn't believe in me, but they still believed in my Torah. Right here, they don't believe in There's nothing, right? Or there's the threat that the book is not relevant. So they bring a proof text, and Rabbi Akiva, he's game. So he brings a set of proof texts himself. Let's see if we get this. Rabbi Akiva said to them, "That is why I am laughing, as it is written, and I will take my faithful witnesses to attest, Uriah the priest, Uriah Kohen, and Zechariah ben Berchai." So Rabbi Akiva says, there's a verse in Isaiah. I might need some help with the time frame here, because we're going to have a couple of more in a second. So Rabbi Akiva keeps on talking, and this is like part of his performance. He's asking a rhetorical question. Now, what is the connection between Uriah and Zechariah? Uriah prophesied during the first temple period, and Zechariah prophesied during the second temple period, as he was among those who returned to Zion from Babylonia. We spoke about him just before. Rather, the verse established that the fulfillment of the prophecy of Zechariah is dependent on fulfillment of the prophecy of Uriah. Right, let's keep on going. Let's just see it all, yeah? In the prophecy of Uriah, it is written, therefore, for your sake, Zion shall be plowed. Now, this Uriah is apparently an Uriah that's mentioned in the book of Jeremiah. Can you close my door, guys? Is an Uriah that's mentioned in the book of Jeremiah, even though it's quoted from Micha. In the prophecy of Uriah it is written, therefore for your sake Zion shall be plowed as a field, and Jerusalem shall become rubble, and the Temple Mount as the high places of a forest. I realize I'm not being very clear about attribution. It's really central to this whole story about who exactly is talking. But they're quoting this thing that Jerusalem is going to be in rubble, and Jeremiah or some figure in relationship to Jeremiah is prophesizing the destruction of the temple. In the prophecy of Zechariah, you see there's a rabbinic tradition that was prophesied by Uriah. In the prophecy of Zechariah, it is written, there shall yet be elderly men and elderly women sitting in the streets of Yerushalayim. So there are two separate prophecies. The first is of the first temple, which is anticipating the destruction. The second is of the second temple, which is anticipating, it seems it's being rebuilt. Okay. So far so good. Now we have to do the psukim algebra. We have to kind of figure out what he's saying here. Until the prophecy of Uriah with regard to the destruction of the city was fulfilled, I was afraid that the prophecy of Zechariah would not be fulfilled. Well, as the two prophecies are linked. Now that the prophecy of Uriah was fulfilled, it is evident that the prophecy of Zechariah remains valid. The Gemara adds, the sages said to him, employing this formulation, Nachmenu and Nichamtanu, Amru lo Akiva Nichamtanu, Akiva Nichamtanu. Some people say the doubling here says, okay, we'll accept we'll accept the logical argument as well. What does Rabbi Akiva do here? I think we can put it under the heading of reopening the book. That is, the other rabbis say the book is irrelevant, put it in the library. Rabbi Akiva says not so fast. The other rabbis say that the period of the sacred is over. We are post a sacred world. And Rabbi Akiva says not so fast. Rabbi Akiva being one of the great readers of the Western tradition, with just this move that he makes here. Right? Now, first of all, who are those two? He quotes a verse from Isaiah, and it's Isaiah the prophet saying, I have two Eidim. One is Uriah and one is Zechariah. Isaiah doesn't know anything about any Uriah in Micah or in Yirmiyahu. He certainly doesn't know about any Zechariah in the 5th century, right? So who these people are remain unidentified. The first thing that Rabbi Akiva does And what he'll do is he will rewrite the past so there's a possibility of a future. The first thing that he does is he gives voice to, he gives names and places to the figures that Isaiah prophesied of. In a way, see how amazing the rabbis are. Akiva is fulfilling the prophecy with his interpretation, right? He's fulfilling the prophecy with his interpretation. It's this Uriah, it's this Zechariah. So he goes back and has the past speak, but then he asks himself this rhetorical question, well, and I think he's kind of going along with the other rabbis, what could one have to do with the other? And I know, of course, from your perspective, well, from their perspective, what about those prophecies? What about the prophecy of Uriah, the one for devastation, and Zechariah, for the one for rebuilding? What do they think? I mean, they're walking away. They think those prophecies have already been fulfilled. They think it's game over. They say, Akiva, put down your book, right? It's done. So how does he get out of it then? What is the shift here? What does he mean when he says? Now, what is the connection between Uriah and Zechariah? Uriah prophesied during the first temple, Zechariah the second. Rather, the verse established that the fulfillment of the prophecy of Zechariah is dependent on the fulfillment of the prophecy of Uriah. That God is author of both of those prophecies. It's in a way, Rabbi Akiva is presenting a view of history, which is implicit every place in Talmud, but it's turned into like a worldview by Hasidim, certain Hasidim, that Geula and Galut are the same. What do you mean they're the same? Is that history, the poles of history, or the movement of history, is between those two poles, and one implies the other. It's kind of like Freud on the antithetical meaning of primal words, right? Where one word implies its opposite. So Galut implies Geula, right? So he says it's one. So go ahead. He says it's one prophecy. Yeah, somebody's Ed. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, as you were saying, they were talking about the book being closed, and what you're saying now about time. I think it's very interesting that they think that time has come to an end, and he goes back to show that when time seems like it has come to an end, it's actually proof of the redemption to come, as in.
Why would you say that? That's crazy. Why would you say that? I'm being rhetorical. Why would you say that?
I think what he's saying is that actually within, as you said, between Galut and Geulah, that essentially within the process of the prophecies, or what he's saying is the destruction means the redemption is closer.
I mean, it also, I think when I said before that Rabbi Akiva and the rabbis do something which is extraordinary, which is they extend sacred history, meaning they render, the Christians do something different, right? They say their sacred history and our sacred history supplants it or whatever, supersedes it. But Rabbi Akiva is, in a way, Rembrandt is just a great comparison, because Rembrandt also takes the secular out of its medieval context, in which the holy is implicit in things, and Rembrandt brings he brings all the stories of the New and Old Testament into contemporary Amsterdam. As we said before, when we looked at some Rembrandt paintings, this is not a compromise in saying, oh, if only we had that older version of holiness, we'd be happier. This is the discovery of the sacred. That's what happens in the Renaissance. Rembrandt, Milton, Shakespeare. Those are the three figures that do it. Rabbi Akiva is doing, that is what he is doing for the Jewish people, right? He is opening up the future it's the destruction, what he's, first of all, just logically what he's done is he's displaced the prophecy. The prophecy about the destruction was of the second temple, right? It's not what you think it is. That's his creative interpretation. The chidush, the rereading of the past, allows for the possibility of a future. And so as Ed is saying, there's that, the redemption is there, you see it clearly, but and this is what Akiva does, is he brings Judaism into time, right? I mean, Judaism before that it's linked to place and sacrifice. And when I say time, I mean, Rabbi Akiva is extending the story, and learning or with the transmission, teaching is something that happens in time, right? You should tell your kids, every generation, all the time. That is the locus of the eternal. The place of the eternal is in time. That is also Ed, right? This is the brilliance of Rembrandt and Milton and Rembrandt and Shakespeare, right? Is they are able somehow to do that as well. I mean, it's obviously much more needs to be said about that, about the distinctions between them. But just now focusing on the way in which you see when the Talmud says a sage is better than a prophet, it's because a sage through his interpretation can redirect prophecy. You can go back and change it. It also has a lot of consequences for the way people think of themselves. I teach this all the time when we do creative nonfiction, right? I teach that to some of the people who are here. We're writing essays, and the best essayists are able to find things in their past that they did not expect to find, that change how they see who they are now, right? Or change how they can be in a future. That when you look at the past as a completely dead thing, it cannot propel you into the future. When you look at the past as alive, which is difficult because often the past is unpleasantly alive, right? That's the problem. It's alive in ways we don't want to recognize. But when you go back into that past, and it's hard, it's work, then there's a possibility of transforming yourself. And it's a great metaphor for what Rabbi Akiva does. Saves the soul of the Jewish people. And he introduces, rabbis are, there are humanists. I'm struggling with that because on one hand I don't want to say it because I don't want to like try to make the rabbis better by calling them humanists. I'm not trying to do that. But they're humanists, and for them the sacred is through the human. There is no sacred without the human. That's why God can say, you know what, keep my Torah. Torah T, right? Torah T is also your Torah. It's already part of being in that relationship. That's what the rabbis discover, that the sacred comes into being through relationship. And Tisha B'Av is about the sundering of that. That is the catastrophe of Tisha B'Av. That relationship is gone. Time is over. But it is Tisha B'Av afternoon, and everybody on Tisha B'Av afternoon, many of the stringencies that apply during the morning up until Chatzot are no longer you can be nice to people, you say hello to people, you don't have to sit on the floor. The Haftorah is also a Haftorah of consolation, really beautiful. We can just end with part of that. I hope the Chabad thing actually has it. Well, whatever. Okay, I had a little hard time finding it before, but if you do go to shul in the afternoon, the Haftorah is really just about consolation and about continuity. As I mentioned at the beginning, I went to the Holocaust Museum this morning. And there's one exhibit there which I didn't even look at today because I spent so much time looking at it in the past. It's about this couple. I don't know if you've seen it. It's at the very end. It's placed very strategically. It's a couple who in the displaced people's camp or whatever, they're these young men and women, and 7 of them get married on the same day. 7 couples get married on the same day, and they're young. And the couple is there and they're being interviewed, And she says at first she had no idea what was happening to her body, and she couldn't, the idea that she could be the source of another human life hadn't even occurred to her. And she describes how she tried to kill the baby, not kill it when it came out, but to disrupt her pregnancy. In the end, she doesn't. And 9 months later, there are 7 births in this refugee camp at the same time, right? You know, and the wedding was she was dressed in equipment from the hospital. You know, the reason this is the way the Jews should be the light to the nations. I don't know if any other people can do it. In the face of the most horrible adversity, people continue. Anyway, great to see you people. Have an easy fast if you're fasting. Yalla.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.